should be.
Okay. Welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It's Thursday, February 20th. We're continuing our conversation on House Bill 50, which is really to try to do basically an inventory to see what state-owned lands would be available for possibly say selling, because it wouldn't be selling, being used for developers to develop affordable housing. And we've heard from AOT and we've heard from BGS. So I want to get a feel of what committee members are thinking. And I know Connor has some thoughts. I want to allow the committee members to weigh in first, see where folks are. What people are thinking. Is this something worth continuing to work on? And if so, what direction would folks want to go? James?
Well, I have more specific, but on a higher level, if we do take it up, it's to me not something we're rushing to get through crossover. But maybe other people think it is small and is worth getting through crossover. But I think it's with what Wanda had said, and plus you have the other state entities who have property. Make sure we're not forcing them to do something. Well, one, the redundancy they already have done, or that we're making sure that what they're looking for or what they're providing or what we want to look at in each piece of data is relevant. I mean, I think this is something, if we keep continue, if it's a big if for me, by the way, that it's something we probably look to work on and would be passing out next year. Make sure we didn't create an animal that doesn't really actually serve our needs. I know it's very long-winded, but.
Other folks?
I'd like to hear from Connor and myself.
Me too.
He did work up some language while we were sitting on the floor.
A new draft.
So do you have enough copies for
I
everybody?
do, yeah.
Excellent. And then we have BGS here, so I think it goes beyond BGS.
They cut off the effective date, but it would generally be July 1st.
Okay.
This is all order on the floor?
Yeah, I kind of started something before.
That's okay.
I just,
Is it in pentameter or what'd you do? Very good, man. Thank
This
you.
is a concept. So
Thank
if you could give that.
some for the BGS crew here. Yeah.
Yes.
Leave you guys hanging.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Sorry, my thing shifted off.
Oh, what's up?
So Connor, you're going to be on the hot seat here. I know you wanted this to be a very simple bill. You had focused in just on BGS testimony we're hearing. It seems like either BGS isn't the appropriate department, there may be other departments. And there may be processes in terms of how to really deal with this if we're going to go forward with it. So why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, so I took a stab and just tried to do what I was saying in the previous hearing and sort of start from the end of what's that vision you want to accomplish here. And that vision is hopefully releasing a number of state properties, whether they be buildings, lands, parking lots, to developers. And the ones I'm thinking are like, Down Street would be the one in central Vermont area there, who does a lot of work with VCHB. But just going through it, so the purpose of the act is to facilitate the development of affordable housing by identifying underutilized state-owned properties that could be converted to housing units. The initiative aims to increase housing availability in Vermont while prioritizing locations near existing infrastructure and transportation. So this would shift it a bit, right? Because right now it's all on the Department of Buildings and General Services, where we've heard that, maybe minimal properties or most would be an AOT. We would expand it a bit. We haven't heard from A&R, but I thought the best course of action would be to put it in the Secretary of Administration's hands as the person who oversees these agencies in consultation with BGS, agency of, why did I put education? Yeah, natural resources. I was just on another wavelength, yeah. So the three different entities would work with the Agency of Administration to identify state-owned land, buildings, and parking lots suitable for the conversion into housing, and then the criteria you put in here. Proximity to a downtown area. I think when I said population center, I mean downtown, you can get to like a supermarket and buy your groceries. You don't need to like even have a vehicle. Availability to water and sewer hookups, as the chair pointed out, last testimony there, because obviously that's going to be the most attractive to developers, and access to public transportation. I think that's the way we're going here. So then the Secretary of Administration is going to look at all this, come with a report, and I'm not prejudging how many would be in this report here. That's the thing. Maybe it's 5 properties, but it's 5 more than we were working with before. And they would come each biennium, essentially. And then the properties identified for conversion could be authorized through our capital bill, just like we sell properties, and be approved by the General Assembly here. So it's ultimately the legislature pulling the trigger on which ones are released. But then the work goes back to the ACCD, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, who's going to put out an RFP for all the properties identified here. And they'll get proposals back, and they'll be released for no cost or less than $1, because sometimes I think you have to put a price on it. And then we build a ton of units, and everybody's happy, and we all go home. Yeah.
And we're winners. I would just add on number 2, the availability of electrical water.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I know it's kind of obvious, but I think that it would just be helpful to put that there, because that's equally as important. Not that any downtown doesn't have electric, but whatever. Thank you.
Well, do you actually care about downtown, or are you just talking about services / amenities?
I guess it's just services, really. I mean, I'm just thinking like, yeah, so sort of like if you drive into like Cabot or something, they got stuff there, right? Like, you can go shopping and stuff, but.
But even if like you're somewhere like not South Burlington proper, but on the strip, you're going to be close to restaurants, maybe a grocery store, et cetera, et cetera. Like
that might need some massage, and then that's your point.
I'm just asking the intent is all. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
your point.
Cool.
That'd be done. What do you mean by the strip?
Just a place with lots of retail.
Just in general, I thought you meant
For like Route 7,
Yeah, that's what I was about. You took the words out of my mouth, because like Route 7 is like in Shelburne, there's places to build there, but they're not downtown.
Yeah.
But they're
I didn't know if you were.
they're on bus routes, they're, and there's shopping. It's
I just thought he
walkable.
was talking about a specific.
Great New South Burlington hang out the strip.
Yeah.
Gotta be up there.
Yeah, I didn't.
So that, maybe open it up just a titch.
Other folks?
I mean, it's also not telling you have to be in a downtown, it's identifying the proximity to downtown, so.
Yeah. I guess this is a question for Alice or maybe somebody not in the room. Is this going to be hard for those other agencies, or do they already have something akin to the space report?
Well, we would have to take testimony from the Secretary of the Administration.
I don't know if you just knew.
We
Yeah.
have to take testimony from A&R.
Yeah.
And I think we'd also have to work a little bit more with BGS and AOT. It's one thing too that BGS mentioned to me is sometimes for AOT land, if there was federal money involved, because we're dealing with that right now.
Yeah.
Message if there was federal money involved in the state obtaining that land, if we sell it, even if it's $1 or whatever, we may have to pay back the feds a portion of the federal dollars that came in. We don't know. We're still, like for Essex, we're still trying to figure that out. So there's issues like that may need to be resolved.
And to that end, and maybe others, I think that section 4B might be overly prescriptive. Because it may be appropriate to convey a parcel at little or no cost, but it may also be appropriate. I mean, these are lots in downtowns, right? But so there may be something that is quite valuable, and maybe those proceeds could lever some other housing project
Or go into that house.
or some other need.
Yeah. I'm trying to see.
Yeah, I mean, you still.
I know the concept is to try to keep the project affordable, I think. Maybe that.
Yeah, but the legislature, I mean, that's a good point, because the legislature, if I'm thinking back to how we have put guardrails around some selling of properties. Sometimes we've said it can be conveyed for $1. Sometimes we're very clear that it needs to be a fair market value. We also can put parameters around, like when we for the Waterbury complex, Wasson Hall and Stanley, we allowed the state to get rid of those two buildings, but they were negotiating with this town of Waterbury in terms of what would happen. And we wrote out the language for that. Sometimes we also give a community or an entity the right of first refusal. Selling 108 Cherry, we did give Burlington the right of first refusal. There's a building in the Capitol complex that we put up for sale. We gave Montpelier the right of first refusal. So there's guidelines that we as a legislature put in session in the Capitol bill in terms of what are the stipulations for sale of that property for letting that go. James?
Yeah, so that 4B that's a good point for, well, two. One that you just mentioned from Wanda saying the other day about, federal liens, whatever you want to call it, like that we'd have to pay back. So obviously it can't be for free or low, no cost. We'd have to make sure we get that money back. So let's just pretend if we were selling a property that the federal government said, well, okay, we put 200,000 and you got to give us 100 grand. Well, we're looking at that. But the other part, what Joe said, sometimes I don't know, we have parcels that are really beautiful and great, but if it's worth, $2 million on the market and we could sell that for $2 million, like, because somebody would actually buy it for development, we can use that $2 million to invest somewhere else in a housing. I mean, it opens up a lot of questions. I'm not saying they're bad questions, but it's bringing more things to the conversation.
And I would say nothing would preclude the state from doing what they currently do at BGS and putting these properties to our attention to say, we should sell this one. We're going to get a lot of money for it,
Mhm.
It doesn't nullify anything else in statute as far as.
Yeah. Just made me think.
I mean, committee members interested in working on this language.
It's a comment similar to my last one. My interest in working on it depends on how hard it is for these folks to do the work. Is it just like another toggle on an Excel file? Yes, it has electric. Yes, it has water. Or is it really a lot of work? And also the payoff. I mean, is it 2 or is it 100? And I'm going back to Wanda's comment about acreage versus, square feet.
What I like about this one is you've got ACCD involved in the go-between, because the other one, there was no go-between. It's like who really works on with the developer or works on transitioning of the property. So ACCD would issue RFPs from developers. There'd be 2 developers, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty short break that I wrote this in.
But it's not RFP from the developers, it's ACCD that would put out RFPs for developers to bid on that or to come back with proposals. And those RFPs would have to include the criteria of proximity to populated, whatever it is. It could be downtown areas, designated growth centers, highly traveled roads, whatever you want to put in.
Serviced areas, yes.
Serviced areas, availability of electrical, water and sewer hookups, et cetera.
Downtown/serviced.
That would be included in there. We continue to work on this. We need to bring in the Secretary of Administration. They need to weigh in on this because they're the ones that are going to be leading this. Need to bring in ACCD because they're the ones who would be going out with RFPs. And I think it also would have to have conversations again with BGS, ANR, and AOT. So that would be our workload. Which is fine, we can do that. Just need to know so that we can set up folks to come in next week and testify on this.
And then the goal being that we try to are we trying to make crossover with this?
Well, what's the sense of working on it between now and then if we're not going to make crossover?
That's true.
So that's the ultimate goal, is to get it ready by crossover.
I felt the way she talked though, and I know we're going to take other testimony, is that she said it would take a while to get some of this information, but Wanda had said.
Yeah, because what else are we really planning on taking out?
Yeah.
Page 32, we decided to, that's gonna be even after crossover.
We just got a new bill.
Or two.
And 176 is a work group, and I think there's an interest from other committees to get that done for crossover. And then Kids Apart, 219, to get the facility, family-friendly visitation and mail facilities. I think there was interest in getting that out
Mhm.
for crossover. So we know we got two bills.
And we're gonna do something with 252, right?
We haven't decided that yet. That one's a heavy lift. I don't think you'd have time with a new committee like this, you won't have time to get that out.
Okay.
That's a heavy lift.
Is that the second felony in good time? Is it that one?
Yeah.
That's a heavy lift.
With those two other bills, I mean,
And then,
we only have 2 weeks, right? So we're
well, we got next
next
week,
week and the week after.
well, the week after is when it's
I know.
due, and we've got markup on a capital bill
Right,
that will
that's what
be
I'm saying.
due shortly
Which is
after
huge.
cross.
Which
And to
brings
do
it-
markup on a capital bill, it's gonna take a good. Takes a longer time.
which goes back to my original point that I don't oppose this, but it's, to me, it's not on the priority list of needing to get pushed before crossover for this year.
You know, it started out as a simple bill to see if we could get it out by crossover, because it seemed pretty simple.
But they always become more complicated.
Is it for Connor's bill? Is it appropriate to ask Emily if she has input after reading it after?
If she's ready to answer.
I mean, I don't
Put
know.
her
if
on
you-
the hot
I was
seat.
just gonna, well, I mean, just nothing that's. I was just wondering what you thought. You were here with, you know, the commissioner. What's your vibe on what Connor's kind of re-proposed?
So, I mean, one, I can't speak for the Secretary of Administration, would need to discuss with Secretary Clark. And fill her in. We've had preliminary conversations with her about this bill. You know, jurisdiction over the property is under BGS, at least for BGS space, and then the other agencies aren't under us, so that would, you know, that move to the Secretary of Administration having responsibility for the report would be a new element that we'd have to discuss with her, and BGS would be supplying a lot of that information. It is helpful to understand more what the criteria would be, because that was something we were, you know, struggling with, to understand what suitability for affordable housing would involve. I think it would be helpful for BGS to have more conversations with you on the bill and in this format, particularly what your intent would be around underutilized. You know, what exactly that means, like for properties, that could be for buildings, for instance, it could be some threshold on employee use. And that's something, as Commissioner Manoli said, we're constantly looking at and evaluating, and something we're specifically working on right now to better understand use of our buildings. But is for land, for instance, like what would the threshold be for your goals for underutilized? And it might be different from how we might hold a property in case we need it in the future, have some sort of goal for it, and want to make sure that we're understanding your intent on that.
Thank you.
But would I be correct in hearing that Commissioner Nolly was basically saying we're already doing this? And if you gave us requests, we could expand what we're currently doing? If I'm correct, then my question is what's the value of putting it into a law?
Because then you have a formal process, and you also have, if there is land from AOT or ANR or BGS that comes available, it's clear it would still have to come before the capital bill, come before the legislature for authority. And then if it's available for developers to submit proposals, then you've got the Agency of Commerce and Community Development involved in that middle step, where the previous version of the bill didn't include any of that. And it was really unclear, where's that middle piece to actually do the transition of the property? How do you get it to the developer's hands? That was silent. in the bill as it was introduced. So it clarifies some of those unknown areas that BGS had and expands it from BGS. There's A&R lands as well for that. And it's clear it would need legislative approval. And there's a state entity that would work with the developer for the property. And in terms, if you sell that property to the developer or hand it, or you sell it for $1, that would be said to the legislature when it became clear there's some properties that would be available. And then the legislature would put the parameters around it.
It would also be helpful to understand, again, just a bit more about the process. And I'm looking at 3B specifically. You know, if the goal would be that all properties identified as suitable shall be authorized, so that would be a change from our current process, again, of bringing specific properties to you. And again, currently we're required to sell on your authorization at fair market value, so this would be a different process that we're currently following. So it'd be helpful to just understand, would that be all properties that are identified in the report are then authorized to go through the process in section 4, or would it be something different?
I mean, keep in mind, folks, this came up Connor drafted this language real fast. So it's just to get the general concept on the paper. That's what you take testimony from to build up on that general concept. This is a general concept.
Connor, could you explain what nominal fee not to exceed $1? So are we talking 50 cents?
A shilling and a halfpenny, Mary?
I thought we were going to go to some Irish later, yes. I guess the only piece there is, it concerns me is usually when we're selling a property from the state, we're expecting probably a little bit more than 50 cents or $1. And so I'm just trying to juggle how that's going to work out. And yet I want, it's for a good cause, I get that, but that's just kind of rambling around in my head.
No, I think that's fair enough. And we suffered over some of that decision like last year of what is market value,
In Williston.
Do you try to give it to communities? So I actually think this is a pretty aggressive deviation from that because it's essentially giving state land away. Yeah.
If we added bathrooms into this, would that solve?
Oh, man, I'm never going to live it down, Mary.
And James.
So, and just to that point with developing, and if you're trying to get missing middle or affordable housing in, it's such a hard, hurdle to try to do it in a way that you can maybe squeak out a little profit out of it. So I think that I do generally think that if we can make that happen, that would increase the viability of these projects getting off the ground. And I think that if we're thinking about 100,000 or 500,000 or whatever the number is, it's so inconsequential to what it will bring us in the long term.
That's it, yeah.
That also brings up another question, though, that's been brought up multiple times already, that we do this and we say this project, we're gonna give this land away for $1, this building away for $1. We have to have, in my opinion, as stewards of state taxpayer money and buildings, some kind of language that has to be somewhere that says, here's the parameters, what your project has to be. It can't just be, like what Kevin mentioned it earlier, but the opposite way, like, who's going to get involved if it's not going to make a profit? Really, there's people with great hearts, but like, you still got to have money. But at the same time, are we giving you something for $1 and you just made, it's bank, to make it general, like you just made bank on this project. So the end product is not in fact affordable or even middle, but more affordable housing. It's just I got a great deal on this and now I get a $600,000 unit that getting $4,000 a month for or whatever.
So let's not get hooked up on selling it for nothing or a dollar.
It's part of
Because
it.
it's part of the proposed language, but if you look on section 3B, it needs some authorization from the legislature, and that's where you set whether or not it's fair market value, or whether you said there's money that has to be reimbursed to the federal government for whatever reason. That's where you're gonna figure it out. That's where you're gonna figure it out. This is just a concept.
Yeah.
It was quickly put on the table.
And my statement's not really about the dollar. It's about making sure the end product is in fact affordable. I don't care if it's $100 or 10,000 or 100,000. Is the end product of us disposing of state property and affordable housing, or is it somebody building luxury condos? That's my.
But that, the point for that
Yeah.
is ACCD would base their RFPs on the criteria that has to be met. Whatever that criteria is, right?
Well, and that's my question, Alice. Where we, or are we the one going to make that criteria that's going to go the piggyback with this?
That's up for the committee to make that decision.
And it's something we could delegate to ACCD when they're developing those RFPs, you know?
Well, that's my point. I'm trying to bring up for the discussion. I'm not trying to be a naysayer. I just want to make sure that that's something we are in fact going to have a conversation about. And that conversation shouldn't be rushed.
I don't think anyone wants to rush
No.
the conversation. So what I'm wondering is trying to figure out how to move around this, figure this bill out. BGS suggested they would bring this new thought to the Secretary of the Agency of Administration. I want to allow BGS time to do that. So if you could do that within the next day or so, and then circle back and see what thinking is there. And it's not just BGS that's involved here. It's AOT, ANR. And I know BGS has a process for when you release demand. AOT has a different process, and ANR may have a different process. But all of that still has to go through approval of the General Assembly. And it doesn't have to be in the capital bill. It's BGS land that's in the capital bill. It's ANR land, it doesn't have to be. Or it's AOT, it doesn't have to be. There needs to be some General Assembly action.
Mhm.
And that's where you put the parameters around that transfer of property or sale of property. That's where you put those parameters around that. So does that make sense to the committee? BGS, reach out to the Secretary of the Agency of Administration. This is an inventory that the Agency of Administration would do and submit that inventory to the legislative branch. And maybe at that step, once that inventory is submitted to the legislative branch, the legislative branch can then give the authority to those respective departments or agencies to pursue working with ACCD to put out an RFP to see if there's any developers that would be interested in those properties.
And without the parameters that those developers have got to work within, you'll never know.
We can work through what those parameters may be.
I know, but we ought to think about what those are before we go through all of this effort to make a bill that is going to be prudence, because if you say you can't raise the rent for 10 years and you can only go 6 stories high and you got to put water in.
It's a little bit beyond we would be doing here.
I don't think we would take, I don't think you would get into the weeds with, on that end of things. Because I think that there's.
Well, for a contractor, and I'm speaking to a contractor, for you to invest your money before you know what your return's gonna be, I doubt you're gonna do that. So if those people who are, if us are already owning the buildings and the property are thinking there's very few, we're already limited before we even contact contractors who might or may not want to invest.
Yeah, I see.
So then to answer that question, then you get AGC here to testify. How would they respond to, if there was property available on the state level, to the ability to, it would be appropriate for an affordable housing project. What would they need? How would they respond? It would be good to hear from AGC.
Because otherwise it's not affordable. We've got to define what affordable is, so the contractors know whether they can still be profitable within affordability.
Right.
That's what I guess I'm trying to say.
The other thing that I'm gonna be vague on this, say a specific case soon. But we just heard about a property and we were wondering who owned, blah, 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 et cetera. And this person got a pretty good sized place for very little money. And now is asking for considerable state money to go toward that investment. So I don't want a situation like that. Well, yeah, we gave this to you, but now we're also going to give you money on the other side. Like there's just a lot more to this than I want to do it right. Is my point. I don't want to get in one of those situations. So.
So just a couple things. I do believe at the end of the day, most of the folks looking to develop these are going to be nonprofits. You know, we saw that from our land trust presentation.
Yeah.
They'll be the ones interested because the barriers, if you're a nonprofit like that, are going to be finding the land and then having the money up front to purchase that land.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you, once an inventory comes out and is submitted to the legislature, it's going to get the creative juices flowing in this building. And people from every part of the state are going to be looking for, what could I do with that land that would benefit my community? It would be a great way to put a shot of life into this housing debate.
So, because Chris Donnelly, who sat here for the CHT, for the woman who spoke about being homeless and finding a place to live, you know, I'd like to hear what he had to say about if we did this, is it even, does that help him?
Right.
It'd be great to hear from people. He is they are the most successful, developer of affordable housing in the state of Vermont. So we should ask him about it.
Yeah.
And he's in the building every day.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, is it not the case that for projects of a certain size, some percentage must be affordable housing? I thought this was already.
That is if they have like the HCB money or I don't know if it's with federal money that comes in, there's stipulations on some.
Okay.
Depending on the source of the funds. So what I'm intrigued in is what you said, Connor, about just having the inventory might be a catalyst for people to really think out of the box. That's the key here, is to have the inventory.
It's all about thinking outside the box.
Yeah, so the structure of letting go of the property is a whole different discussion. The first part is really to get that inventory. So maybe instead of going into how the state would let go of that property, we end up just focusing in on, let's get the inventory done first. And then figure out what we do once we get the inventory done. Just putting that out on the table for a thought. And that the inventory needs to look at that criteria. Proximity to service areas, downtown areas, designated growth centers, availability of electrical, water, and sewage, and access to public transportation. So that gives the Agency of Administration, BGS, AOT, A&R some direction in terms of how to narrow down properties that they have in their portfolio that might be available. And then just come back with the inventory.
Might be a way to start.
Maybe that's the best way to start, because that's where your bill kind of started, was the inventory, not get into how you sell it. Structure around that. Knowing that there needs to be a state agency that needs to be that conduit once you sell it. Once you're ready to go, but maybe that's too premature at this point to think about that. Maybe we just dial it back a little bit and just really focus on who does the inventory. And maybe the entity that does the inventory is the Secretary of the Agency of Administration in consultation with BGS, A&R, and AOT, anybody else we can think of. And leave some of the rest of that to be deliberated about once that inventory comes back, because that's going to bring out the issues that will then need to be resolved once you know that inventory. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to do it. Rather than get bogged down in how we're gonna sell it off.
Because if
We
we
just
leave it
didn't
to the
know it's
inventory
there.
piece, I think it's a pretty simple bill to get through.
And then I'm sure we'll get into this when we do the language, but on, is it two, B2? Capacity. Should probably get thrown in there too, because it might be situated near electrical, water and sewer, but the treatment plant may not have capacity, so
Mhm.
it's kind of a non-starter.
Availability and capacity.
Yeah.
I suspect though, you don't want to, it might be better to leave it somewhat vague and then somebody else can scrub the feasibility of a specific plot, because we certainly don't have the capability of doing that.
Yeah, but I think you have to have more structure to what you're doing. It's great to have a inventory, but then if there's not even a gentle or a kind of some parameters around it, then you could have a field day with everyone doing whatever they wanted on whatever project.
Yeah, you want to
think-
narrow down.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that's what I'm saying.
Plus, you wanna
right,
know if a third of it's no good right out the gate.
Right,
If what?
If a third of it's no good right out the gate, because it already doesn't have municipal store capacity, then
right.
it's, wasting somebody's time to even think about it.
So is the committee okay if BJS reaches out to the Agency of Administration, gives them just a look? See, I wouldn't focus so much on the disposition and development process. It would be more just doing the inventory. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll send this electronically to Emily now.
And then, like in section 3, just, the Secretary of Administration would submit the report listing all the inventory, all the eligible properties to the General Assembly. I put it to the General Assembly, maybe. And then just not worry about the rest of B, the rest of 3. I wouldn't worry about B, and I'd take out 4. Does
That's fine.
that make sense?
First
At the
start.
starting
It
point?
does, yeah.
Build from there.
Excuse me.
Hopefully we can do more. But it's a good place to start.
Okay, made some headway, folks.
I'll agree with that.
Oh, I'm good with that. I do
We
think
want the inventory.
at the end of the inventory is gonna be like throwing meat into an arena with lions, it's gonna get people thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can have the fire towers throwing the meat. We can have the boats.
It could be like,
So we're gonna finish up, but before we do, I just want to put out questions to the committee. How are you feeling about the capital? Because we're almost done in testimony. Almost done. We got the heavy lift. We have the heavy lift next week with Eric Black.
Right.
With what?
Eric Black to DEC with clean water. Drinking water revolving loan fund, clean water.
Well, you
revolving
keep
loan fund.
saying the revolving loan fund and it never revolves.
All kind of revolve.
it was zero. It's zero in the packet.
Oh, they got lots of money.
Oh, well, double check.
And we've got 14.5 million that's being that the appropriations that the governor has proposed in the appropriations bill that we put aside to free up to match federal dollars. So that's, and outside of that, we're pretty much done. We're still waiting for UVM to come in and testify.
And why isn't UVA?
We've connected with them. So I said to Phil yesterday, I said, next week's the last part that we're taking testimony.
Do we tap the new trustees to say, get the UVM in here?
Yeah, well, we're working on it. So how are people feeling, James?
I just have a suggestion, Madam Chair. Had talked about new markup, which is the fun part, and especially for new people. Do you
It'll
see-
be fun for you. It's gonna be new.
I've done markup before, but not like
Not
this.
with money.
Not with this, but anyway, to just review your documents, review them and get your memories refreshed. So when Queen Bee asks you questions, you don't go, well, you might still. None of us will remember everything, even the veterans. But like just review your documents, especially so we will do some next week as a primer, but then you'll have your town meeting week off. Bring your binder home and you don't have to look at it every day, but like go through it and review it and kind of try to refresh yourself. Just maybe give ourselves a little bit of get ourselves back up to speed from the things. So it's just a suggestion.
It's shifting gears. The floor is at 9:30 tomorrow. So is there intent to
We're not meeting tomorrow morning
not meeting?
until after the 4th, so you can sleep in.
Oh, God.
You were
I knew it.
We can get up at 3:30 instead of 2:30. So
Well, and then,
No, I just wanted to apologize. There are a lot of zeros, but none that are just zero.
If you put on more zeros, it gets bigger sometimes.
Well, wait till you get to
Yeah.
wait till you get to the presentation.
I think,
It'll be even less.
I was gonna say, I think what I was looking at was zero for all the remaining funds, so that was probably related.
so for Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, there's no appropriation that has been proposed for this year or next year.
We've had so much money.
Well, and I'm also hearing that there's projects are not going out the door.
Hmm.
I'm hearing that from the regional planning commissions. So I've asked them to send me some emails
Will they
indicating
come in to testify?
they probably will, but I wanted to get the back information first, because there's a lot of money out there, and if we. And also what I heard, there was some ARPA money that didn't get encumbered by December 24th,
Or
and we have to send that ARPA money back,
I'm sorry, we have to what?
send it back.
It's got, it's no, there's
It
no.
was required to be encumbered, federal
To buy
requirement
some
to be encumbered, so we have to work with appropriations committee
not what
on that
in a yearly.
and see how much money that is, but I heard that too.
Do you have a rough estimate of what?
No.
No. Still the beach.
Millions.
I think that like there's a couple projects that give me a bit of anxiety, but it might be worth a conversation. It feels like we're pushing a lot of the bigger projects off at the later years. Whereas like last year when we were in this committee, we're like, women's prison, gonna be millions and millions. We gotta put some away. It's zeroed out for these 2 years. And then we're looking at 25 in future years. Not to mention, we won't speak about the structure in Bennington, but there's some heavy things coming down that, and it, part of me feels like
Got some ideas.
we're pushing it off on future legislatures.
It's part of, we've done that for a long time.
duct tape.
Better than that.
The other thing, those 3 projects that Alex Farrell came in on, Commissioner of
It doesn't come back.
Well, they did send a document, email, Phil has it and I haven't, with more backup information. I haven't had a chance to go through it.
Oh,
but
with the three
there's
like $1
projects,
million
Bennington,
deals.
Brattleboro,
I thought he was coming back though. No?
well, they sent it to me.
Oh, yeah.
So that's gonna be a heavy discussion. And I think there's some thoughts around that we can do,
Looks good to me.
but well,
Oh,
Barry,
right. We wanna- The one's Barry.
who owns that building in Barry? Do you know?
Who owns the land?
The land?
Gina got-
I think there's a partnership that owns it now. It was Fecto's land.
That's right. So who's on, what partnership
It's
owns it?
Down Street Barry Area Development Corporation, Tom Lozon,
Hmm.
and
Mayor.
there's one other entity I can't think of right now. There's 4.
And how long have they been working on it?
Well, the original permits were pulled back in the 90s,
Wow.
and it was
Yeah, but
permitted.
not for this.
No, for basically the same setup. The Fectos had a plan to develop it, but it never went through. So they went through the re-permitting process back in I want to say back in November 2024, because they did the RFP for all the permitting and all that stuff. And I think that's all come back. So they're ready to put a shovel of dirt.
Maybe we should get them in here and testify. Is the city involved in this?
The city, the town, yeah, the city, the town. Berry Area Development Corporation. Lozons and Down Street
I mean, we could get all the folks from,
and CVMC.
It was Down Street.
Down Street Housing?
It's a very.
No, it's the statewide thing that they help low income folks on the path to home ownership. They'll put down like a deposit, not deposit, but a down payment on your mortgage, and then it keeps. Gus was talking about it, Sealy.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they keep the certain real estate within their profile because you buy it, say they put the 20% down so you don't have to have PMI. You can't turn around and sell it for fair market value in 2 years if they can only incrementally increase what your profit's gonna be, and it goes back into their housing portfolio, so they can connect more people up with a lower, below market, path to home ownership.
Yeah, I don't think I've got your cross paths with James. I have.
He said it the other day, but so basically it just is that they put, like she just said, they put the down payment, but when you sell, the very basic level is they get their money back first. And they're, like, there's more that she just said, but like that's a very general.
But that's a separate organization. He wasn't with Down Street.
No.
No, they partnered with Down Street on something.
so for these three entities, these three projects, this is brand new to the capital bill. And I shared this with the administration, they told me about it, and I said, it opens up the door.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be pretty cognizant of this, if we go ahead with this, with
Do you mean
bonding.
in the sense that there are like public-private entities with earmarks?
With bonded dollars, with limited bonded dollars going towards private entities like this. To help, that's gonna put a lot, if we do this with bonded dollars, it's gonna put more pressure on our capital bill. There'll be other organizations, other situations like this happening in other towns throughout the state, and they'll come knocking.
What was the response, the administration?
It's really no response.
Well, I thought Alex was coming back, so that's.
Well, they
Yeah, I
did
know.
send some information. I'll find that email and send it out to the committee, but I think we're gonna need more testimony. Might be good to get of the three, Bennington, Brattleboro, and Barry, get all three entities that are working on this and have them come in. So we can get a better feel for it. And that. But I would just caution opening up bonded dollars for something like this. Because
That could be like a runaway train.
Yep.
Unfortunate.
some of us have seen that, not for some big projects like this, but others that just.
Well, even this year, I mean, you're diverting funds away from needed state entities.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a balance. I mean, you want to help folks,
Right.
but there's a limit to what you can do.
So
Well,
2 questions. So with those 3 projects, you're saying bonded dollars. Do you mean the bonded side, and you wouldn't mind it if it came from cash fund, or you don't want it in the capital? And I'm not saying you personally, but putting in the capital bill in general would open it up to campers. Okay. So
well, particularly with bonded dollars.
okay.
Yeah, it really opens up the capital with bonded dollars. Yeah, so I just want people to think about that. I mean,
Also,
What I thought
when they
you-
turn to shell, there won't be a cash fund anyway, or the shelter to May rather.
They're getting chippy on us.
I know. You never know.
is Bryce still on? No?
No, you never know what's
He
available
didn't
for
come back
cash.
on.
Oh,
You
when we got
never
back.
know what's available for cash
Oh,
until the
he's-
last day of the session.
He went down.
I was gonna commend him because he was speaking of bonded dollars and their value over time earlier today. And that was a very right of center concept.
We're gonna let him get away with it.
So any questions in terms of how we approach markup or what markup is? Because we're gonna go through each line item and say, well, they came in, the request, what the governor put in is $500,000. What do we do with it?
And Alice, are you looking at so that the members will understand there may be a couple of nights involved?
It may be,
So just to keep that in the back.
because we're on a schedule and we may have to put in some long hours, give you as much notice as possible.
Do you want me to bring pizza or you?
We're not there yet.
Oh, we're not there.
But, and the thing is, hang on, Sean. The thing is, sometimes when we get to that point, we break the committee up into certain groups and you can go off and work, get a little bit more information in a smaller group. And I think that may happen with some of the clean water. I'm waiting to see what Eric has to say with, Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, and the municipal pollution grants. And also, I think we've got to do some work with those ag grants.
Who, it's a revolving loan fund? Awesome.
It's Department of Environmental Conservation, and it's Eric Blatt.
So there's one now, they want to establish one.
Well, we've had it for a long time, and our
It's been a
state
long time.
dollars match federal dollars. It's a 5-to-1 match. So that's ongoing every year, depending what projects are in the queue. And we usually like to see those projects that are in the queue, and that's been hard to get.
It's been very hard to get.
And then we also have state money that we put aside to match IIJA funds, which is the Infrastructure Investment Job Act.
That's a good night.
And that's over a 5-year period that federal money is available. So the governor has proposed in the appropriations bill that there is some cash that was put aside in the cash fund 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. I did.
The 14.5 million that was put aside, the state match for the
It was 2
IIJA
years ago.
2 years ago.
Years ago.
And that was put aside in the cash fund, and the language that the governor has proposed that's in here unreserves that, because it was reserved, it was put aside to hold, and now it takes the hold off. That will then, that 14.5 will be used to match the federal dollars for IIJA, hoping the feds still come through with their commitment for IIJA.
That's a big question.
And that's a big question. And then all those dollars at 14.5 gonna get out in a timely manner. So we got some digging to do. So we may have a couple people on the committee do further digging into that. Gotta see after Eric comes in on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Where the lay of the land is.
Mhm.
For that.
Now, would you like us tomorrow for the three of us that met with,
Jennifer Coleman.
Jennifer at noontime? Do you want us to tell you what came of that meeting? We can do that very quickly.
Yeah, why don't you wait for tomorrow to do that? Tomorrow morning, we're gonna pick up again, with Katie McGlynn
Mhm.
and Tony Fallon to continue going through the, checklist for H32, so we can start making some decisions on what policy decisions we're making so that Katie can do a new draft. You've got to get through that. Was she? And then we're having Ben come in tomorrow at 1:00 to go through language for some of our recommend to the Appropriations Committee for the 300,000, 200,000 for converting the work camp to a treatment. He's going to work that up into language that will be submitted, that we'll submit. I also had a conversation with Energy and IT and had two conversations over there. And I also had a conversation with the chair of House Judiciary. The one with Energy is the 3 million for Wi-Fi. We agreed that we want to recommend that we would like approach to find $3 million for Wi-Fi and DOC.
Mhm.
Energy Committee is going to submit that same request. So we got two committees requesting that. There was also talk, who brought this up? Was it you about the deputy sheriff?
6 positions.
The 6 positions. I talked to Representative Lalonde yesterday, last evening. They're very interested in that. That's gonna be a real heavy lift and approach. real heavy lift. In fact, I think the sheriffs have asked for 34 positions, state's attorneys and sheriff's department, 34 positions. So Martin was very clear that we really need those 6 positions for deputy sheriffs. So I said, we are too, and we're gonna make that recommendation to approach.
Yep.
And House Judiciary is gonna make the same recommendation. That's what I know at this point.
Good.
And of course, there's the Wi-Fi, right?
Yep,
Yeah, we
that one
talked
is
about
us
that.
too. Energy and us. For that, so we're gonna plug away at that. Anything else before we
Well done.
finish up for the day? Joe can go home,
No,
catch up on his sleep.
He's got work to do.
listen, I can't wait till tomorrow.
Then the